Hello, this is Christina Walkoff, and we are talking today with one of the inductees into the Marin Women's Hall of Fame. Beverly Wright Bastian is this year's 2007 inductee in the category of environment. And Beverly, welcome. Hi. Environment seems like one small part of all that you've done.
Well, when you consider that our environment is really something more than nature, it really, the environment words can cover all my categories of activity.
Good point. I understand one of the women who nominated you talked about meeting you some 50 years ago when you reorganized the daycare center that her children were at. And I'm presuming your children as well?
Oh yes, I wouldn't have ever gotten involved with nursing school if it had been for my own children. I think you might call unplanned parenthood is responsible for that. I had the slightest interest in education as a career. I had interest, of course, as everybody does, in who wants to be educated, but as a career I didn't have any until I had a child. And I realized that she deserved something better than me all day and night. So I sent her to nursery school, and in doing that I discovered a whole new world, which I thought needed to be reformed. So I started reforming it.
Now, how did you decide to go to a parent-based nursery school idea?
Well, it actually
was quite new.
Nursery school started out as a co-op during the YWCA days, actually. That's the first. And then, but what the real problem was the parents were really amateur psychologists. I thought they were doing more harm than good. So what we needed was a cooperatively owned nonprofit school with professional staff. And that's when I went then to graduate school to learn how to do it, because I realized that it's not fair to complain and criticize unless you give people options as an alternative to what's actually happening. But to do that, you have to know what you're doing. So I went back and took some graduate work.
Now, this was in the 50s, right?
Late 40s and early 50s.
And then you took on an interracial, cross-cultural preschool center in Marin City?
I just used one of the corporations that I founded in Mill Valley, and we sponsored that as a branch nursery school in Marin City. Long before Head Start was even thought about or talked about. But the parents in Mill Valley are a very liberal group of people, and so they were in Sausalito. That was the group that was feeding into the Tamalpais Nursery School. And so they were very responsive to the idea of starting an interracial nursery school in Marin City, which we did through the St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church.
From there, you went to the Historical Society?
Well, actually, I was all doing nothing.
It was all at the same time?
It was all at the same time. Actually, what I was doing was raising 3 children, looking after my mother, taking care of my husband, who was Bob Bastian, the political cartoonist for the Chronicle and KQED at the time, and going to graduate school. And my vocation or volunteer work was with the Historical Society. And the nursery school was for my children's sake, as well as by this time I was being paid, which was very helpful.
Yeah,
not very much, but enough to get by. So it really sums up to this. I used to wonder how I did so much in so little time. Now I wonder how I do so little in so much time. There's a difference in age.
So for women like myself who think that it's all we can do to work a part-time job and take care of 2 children, how'd you make the leap? I mean, I would like to do more of what you're doing, and I don't know how to make that leap. What was it about you?
I don't have any idea how to tell you how to make that leap. All I know is that I didn't get to play tennis or go swimming like the rest of the outside of the popular activities of my day. Tennis had just become commonly popular. And bicycling hadn't come on yet either. In fact, the IJ took a picture of me riding my bicycle because I was the only person in southern Marin over the age of 12 who was riding a bicycle at that time. And that's pretty funny, really. But it wasn't cool among the kids, the 8th graders, to ride bicycles. So once you got to be 12, you couldn't ride a bicycle anymore.
That's funny.
So I was the only one who rode one. And I rode it because I couldn't drive.
Right.
And I didn't drive because I had narcolepsy. And I consider an automobile to be a lethal weapon, and I wouldn't carry a gun, so why would I drive a car? I wasn't interested in killing anybody.
Now, you've had narcolepsy since you were a child, yes?
Narcolepsy is a lifetime thing.
Right. And that means that you tend to fall asleep at unpredictable times?
Yes, I probably won't fall asleep right now, but if I were here alone, I probably would fall asleep. I used to fall asleep walking, but I don't do that anymore.
That's a good thing.
So, but there's no cure. And in fact, at one time they thought it was psychosomatic, but it's not. It's a central nervous system. It probably comes from having scarlet fever as an infant.
So I understand that you moved to Belvedere in your 20s. So you moved from Oakland?
No, I actually, my grandfather Wright was a founder, one of the founders of El Cerrito, when it came from Rust to El Cerrito. And then my mother and father were divorced. They were actually, I always just thought of myself as a wartime casualty because they met while my father was going through New York during World War I. And then she remarried, and we moved to Martinez because Martinez was the county seat. My stepfather was a county official. So we lived in, I really grew up in Martinez. Graduated from high school there. I lived there when I was going to college. But I came to Marin County to live in 1946. So I was in my 20s, but not in the 20s.
You've been very instrumental in the Tiburon Historical Society, preserving things that I didn't even know were there. You know.
Well, that was.
How did you start?
Most of the things I've done in my life are by accident. Including the nursery schools, as I explained about having unplanned children. But how I got started, my childhood was spent with a lot involved in California history, because in addition to other activities, my stepfather was a gung-ho native son of the Golden West. In fact, he carried gold coins in his pocket for change until Roosevelt took us off the gold standard and it became illegal to have gold. But up till then, I can remember him using gold coins commonly. He was a real Californian. And his idea of a great time to spend was driving a Packard car, which he always drove a Packard because he thought it was heavy enough to stay on the road. And I guess, I hope he was right, because I was scared to death always when he was driving. But in any case, we'd use these Packard cars and we'd drive all over the state, visiting historical markers and dedicating historical markers. So I saw California in the days when there was very little development and lots of hills, and it was natural for me to be interested in that, and interested in California history. But when I got to Belvedere in Tiburon, although Old St. Hilary's Church is in Tiburon, it actually is mainly the view of Belvedere. So those of us who lived in Belvedere were very interested in what was going to happen to that building, because it's so picturesque sitting there on the hill. And
no, it had been closed. It was no longer an operating church at the time?
Yeah, it had been deconsecrated. They had built with the building boom, they had built a new Catholic church, also called St. Hilary's, but it's New St. Hilary's, down the road, and it became a parish. Up to that point, it had just been a little mission church serviced by Sausalito or San Rafael didn't have a priest of its own. Anyway, they were going to sell the building. The Archdiocese owned it. And we were very concerned about what would happen to it, whether it would be torn down or converted into a tea room or an antique shop or heavens knows what old churches are being converted to in those days. So we formed an organization which we jokingly called the Protestant Protective Society for the Preservation of Old St. Hilary's Catholic Church. And because all of us were either Protestants or atheists. And we had among them was another historic person whose avocation was history, and she happened to be also wealthy. So she said if we would organize an organization that would be tax exempt, that she would donate the money to buy the church. Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, it seemed pretty simple to me. I didn't think we were in for much trouble with that arrangement. So at her request, I organized this informal society, Protestant Protective Society. And then we got down to real business, and we decided we better get some more representation from the community. So we invited neighbors of ours, particularly those who had attended Old St. Hilary's Church. Mm-hmm. We needed someone to discuss things with the Archdiocese. So we solved all the problems we had, and we'd just gotten the buildings acquired, bought it for the price was determined at $10,000, which was the deficit that year of the St. Hilary's Parish. So that we paid off the deficit and got the building. Mm-hmm. Well, $10,000 is a lot of money in 1950s. So we just no more than had acquired that when I got a letter from the California Academy of Science in Golden Gate Park. The botanist there was Thomas Howell, and he was congratulated us on saving this wonderful chapel, as he called it, in the midst of this rare wildflowers. Well, we had no idea that it was in the midst of rare wildflowers. In fact, I'd only noticed from my view window lupin and poppies. I didn't know anything about any other wildflowers, and they didn't seem very rare. So I have to admit, I was only 39. I was young and audacious. I had the nerve to call him up and tell him that, imagine telling the curator of botany that he didn't know what he was talking about. I said I'd never seen those wildflowers there, and I thought he must have the wrong chapel, and we'd saved the wrong place. He was very gentle and very kind and very patient. And he said he'd like to come over and show me, so I said fine. So we met. I must say I learned more in an hour and a half with him than I ever learned in any college class on botany. And sure enough, the church was in the middle of a rare wildflower garden, but what you might call weeds, we would call grasses and consider them part of the wildflowers. So we ended up, and that's how I got involved, I guess, in the environmental reputation. You can't imagine being so ignorant and being such an authority as I became, which is just really a joke about knowing what I was talking about. But I did understand the purpose of saving the land. I understood that even though if I didn't recognize a wildflower, there was some value in saving them. I also recognized that it was very important to save historic buildings, should be saved in their setting, that they're much more enhanced by being in their natural setting, so that it was a great value to save the hill, to protect it from having houses built right up to its doorstep.
So did it happen that St. Hilary's itself was saved first, and then the hill came about? Or?
Yeah, right.
Right. Now,
well, St. Hilary's became the focal point for saving the hill.
Okay.
But it was with the focal point, where they thought we'd saved the hill, we actually saved the church in just a little knoll it stands on, whereas the area that was really at question, the environmental area, right. We more correctly call it ecology, I think. that's what surrounds the church.
I would imagine that all of this talent and energy didn't come out of the ether. Any idea how you came to be who you are? Your mother, the times you grew up in, some woman you admired, some man you admired?
Well, I think we're all a product of our environment, both nature and nurture. So I don't know how to isolate that from anything else. I think the fact that I came from a family that was interested in both politics and history helped. They were also independent, spirited people. That sort of, but I took that for granted. I never looked upon them as somebody setting an example for me. It was just a natural way of things were. Right. When I came to Marin County as a young adult, I was 25 and had a newborn child, my first. I think I just learned new things from the people that were around, that I was working with in the nursery school in particular, and in the school parents operation. But when I got involved in community activities and got, for example, the old St. Hilda's being the first major project, I came acquainted with Carolyn Livermore, and she certainly was a mentor. She was a very remarkable person, in many ways very formidable. She remember her saying once to me, and I said, I didn't know what we were going to do because we didn't have enough money to fulfill our option. We were going to lose what we put up for the option of the land because we hadn't raised enough, and what the real estate developer wanted. She said, just flash the cash. She said all real estate developers are looking for cash always, so just flash the cash. Well, it was stunned me because it's so totally unlike Mrs. Livermore, who was such a grande dame, that I couldn't imagine anybody using that expression, but she was right. And so I offered the money that we had to the developer and said he could have it immediately, or he could wait for the rest. And he settled.
Wow.
So,
it's like Jerry Maguire. You're showing the money.
Yeah. But Mrs. Livermore also had a kind of dignity that was also a good example. And when she was taking care of Rosie Verrill, the goat lady who gave to what seems to me the most generous charitable gift in the whole county at any time by anybody. And I say that because she gave 100% of her assets. Most people give a tenth if they give anything. And Rosie Verrill gave 100%. Mrs. Livermore was as much of a gentlewoman with her as she was with anybody else. She was really a very remarkable person. Vera Schultz was another person who helped me a lot. I don't know exactly how I first met Vera Schultz, but she nominated me for the Family Service Agency board. So somehow she must have known, she must have recognized some characteristic that she admired in me, because she really didn't know me that well. Of course, what she didn't really know was that I was apt to turn things upside down, because leaving things in the status quo is not my style. I usually can see a better way, or think there should be a better way of doing things, and I always want to change everything. That doesn't make you very popular.
I would imagine that was making you quite unpopular with some people.
Well,
what sorts of things got in your way?
I had a lot of problems with people, with officials, people serving on city councils, on commissions, on board of supervisors. They couldn't. I always thought that logic and reason would prevail, but it was sort of an unknown characteristic to most of those people. And in fact, when I first started working on on the open space, I actually had to define and spell the word ecology to the Board of Supervisors. I mean, you think you could do it by sound if nothing else, but no, you have to explain it to them. And there was, however, in fairness, and I don't want to be construed as being anti-male, there is nothing that's accomplished without the help of men, and especially in those days, because they had all the votes. But there were always a few who made sense and who were helpful. One of them on the Board of Supervisors, who was always a swing vote, was Bill Ganoss from Novato. He made sense. He was a very simple man, nothing pretentious about him at all, but he understood logic and he understood good sense. Another person who was very helpful in the Mill Valley area was Michael Warnham, who later became state senator, I think. He started out on the Mill Valley City Council and then the Board of Supervisors. He did a lot of pro bono work. He was an architect. And in fact, he's the one who designed the nursery schools I built. And he did it as a father, pro bono. And in the case of the Mill Valley Nursery School, he actually guaranteed the bank loan, which meant that he had so much of his credit was used up until the loan was paid off. But he somehow had faith in me. And I think that was a big help, is that people seemed to have confidence that I could get something done if I tried. And I am a creative thinker, and I like to think of myself as that too. I always wanted to be an artist, a performing artist of some kind, or a visual artist, but I think I have the mental capacity, but I don't have the connection between my head and my fingers. Still having that problem. And so I was delighted to discover when UC Berkeley did a study and came up with the idea that besides artists and dancers and musicians, that there were creative thinkers. You could be a thinker and be creative. So I thought, that's what I am going to be, as a creative thinker. And I think being a creative thinker helps to envision how things can be done and how to get people to help you do it.
That's pretty wonderful. Can I resort to my notes for a moment? Some of the adjectives, I've talked to a number of people who know you, and some of the adjectives I've heard are mental powerhouse, perseverance, that's not really an adjective, but perseverance, you have vision. I like this one, human beaver.
Oh. Well, I
Smart,
don't give
organized.
Talking about being a human beaver, I don't give a damn about most things.
What do you give a damn about?
Well, I give a damn about politics. I give it, although I've been beginning to get in despair over it. However, I think that comes also from my early childhood, where the catechism at our dining room table was not about religion, it was about politics. You had to know who the Secretary of the Navy was, and you had to know who the Secretary of State was. And if it changed over, you better know that too, if you wanted dessert.
What would you tell take a young woman who's a high school senior in Marin now, or a young woman who's a mother with 2 young children, or a woman who's 45 and her kids have just gone to college and she doesn't know what to do with herself. How could you impart something to these women? What do you think?
Well, first of all, they should do volunteer work, no matter what age they are. And I think it's very good that kids get community service credits these days. When my children were growing up, nobody heard of such a thing, and my children did it just because they were expected to do it. I can't tell you how many thousands of envelopes my 3 children must have stuffed over the years, whether it was for open space or nursery school bills or whatever it was. They were always stuffing envelopes, and when they complained, I reminded them that their bicycle came from stuffing envelopes. But in a general way, you could say to parents today, my advice to young people, in order to save themselves and save the world, is that they should teach their children to be civilized. Most children today do not understand the importance of social behavior. That you, in order to get along in this world, you're only with your parents a short time, like 20 years max, and you're could be 60 or more years with the rest of the world. So you better know how to get along with the rest of the world, and you're not going to get along with the rest of the world by being overindulged and spoiled and catered to at every moment. And I think the other thing is the difference between my time and the time of young people now. And this is something that people should do for themselves. They should now have enough time for leisure. There's too much to do without enough time to relax. And there should be open space in a room even. Just a blank wall is a good thing just to rest your eyes. So you can be busy without being without doing too much. You need to have some time to contemplate. You can't be a creative thinker if you don't give yourself some time to think.